Good afternoon. My name is Taylor, and this is Leadership Line of Sight. I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Dr. Nikhil Joshi. He's an immunologist and founder of Clinical Trial Hero. Thank you so much, and welcome,
Yeah,
Nikhil.
thank you
It's
so
good to see
much.
you.
Thanks so much for having me on, Taylor.
Oh, it's great to talk to people that are doing big things. And I think that one of those things that we're learning through more contact with the internet over time is that there's so many different ways to connect people, but not all the ways have been done yet.
Yes, totally. We've got
Take me
to
into like the
use
problem that you're,
technology.
yeah, take me into the problem that you're solving with Clinical Trial Hero.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess the story starts when I'm going through my medical training. I am diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. I go through a couple rounds of cancer therapy. And, through that, I go from being a doctor to being a patient. And I learn what it's like to be a patient. And I learn about the things we do great and the things we do terribly. And, my life is dramatically impacted by a clinical trial. It's the reason why I was, able to have my daughter. Like I didn't end up like a lot of people who were treated with my disease in the 70s and 60s. And it made a huge difference to my life. As a result, when I came out of it, when I became a physician and a clinical trialist, I realized that it is important that people have access, that people have the ability to join clinical trials, and that we just do it in a much better way, a much more patient-centric way.
So let's go back there a little bit. Was this in med school where you were diagnosed with cancer?
No, I was in residency. So I'm like seeing patients one day, being a patient the next.
Holy whiplash. I read this book called When Breath Becomes Air. Are you familiar with that?
I think I've heard of it. Is it by Atul Gawande?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
And the book is about a doctor that's diagnosed with a rare form of spine cancer and eventually ends up losing his life to it. And it's such an it's interesting where you see the experience by someone who has studied it and understands. So like when this diagnosis came through, you had probably such a deeper understanding than the average person when they get this type of news. What was that like?
It was interesting. Okay, so I'm in the doctor's office. It's me and my mother, and I get diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. And my arms and everything just sag in relief. I like, because I know that it can be Hodgkin's lymphoma or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the difference is like 15 to 20% mortality at that time. So I'm relieved. I know I'm like, this is 92% I'm going to live. I can handle that. That's a good odd. My mother's crying, breaking down, just like weeping, saying, couldn't it have been nothing? I was like, no, I knew I had cancer, but like, how bad was it? I can do this. This is fine. Don't worry, Mom. We'll be okay.
Wow, that's such like that is very different than the average
It is.
person, because you knew like think about your mom's response there, where a lot of patients would walk into that room being like, okay, it's like the wheel of fortune and it could land on Hodgkin's, non-Hodgkin's, or we made a mistake, you're fine.
Yes.
Right? And we
Yes,
made
and
a
she's
mistake
hoping for that one. She's
wasn't on
hoping,
your menu.
right? But I'm like, it's not bankrupt. It's not bankrupt. We'll be okay.
Wow, that's really something else. So, and great to hear that you had that family support. So, what happened after that? Was this uh, did you continue your residency, or did this immediately stop things and change with their surgeries?
It definitely changed things. So I continued to teach during that time, and I did a radio show called Dr. C that was on CBC and went across the country, and then eventually won an award from the New York festivals for best health documentary. It was a time where I felt like I was at my best, to be honest with you. Like, I often think about who Cancer Nick was, who I was during that time. And I'm really immensely proud of that person. And I think I showed a lot of fortitude, a lot of gratitude, and a lot of optimism. And, I think we're defined by who we are in our darkest hours. And I'm lucky to like that person.
Wow. That's I like that insight. And I genuinely believe that the weapons that we have to use, like the tools we have for tomorrow, they come from the wounds that we have yesterday.
Yes.
They match directly. And that anti-fragilism, that's got to really give you a different perspective.
It does, but I like the way you put it better. That the wounds of yesterday are the tools of tomorrow. Like, yeah, okay, that makes absolutely. If you adopt the right attitude, 100%. That's where and that's, I guess, the only attitude we should adopt, really.
Yeah, and you were saying that now you have a daughter, and that was related to how treatment has changed.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your treatment and how it was better than what was before?
Sure. So the treatment before was called MOP chemotherapy, and like it was awful. Like it was like people would vomit, people would become infertile, people get lung damage. There was, it's rough. And what we have now, ABVD, is no walk in the park, but it's like it's better. Numbers are better, tolerability is better. I was still told I had a 50% chance of being infertile. I don't think that was accurate, but I was told by a doctor that I had a 50% chance of being infertile. So I'm like in my 20s, going to one of those donations, right? Like going to a sperm donation thing. And like, it's just an odd feeling. It's a super odd feeling to be like, I don't feel like doing this, but I have to in order to make sure I have a child in the future if I live through this thing. So like it's bizarre, it's funny. You got to find some humor in it. I was just like, this is wild.
Yeah, like one of those "how did I end up here" moments.
How did I end up here now? And like now you want me to masturbate? This is really weird. Like I'm not in the headspace right now, people. Like
Yeah,
I'm in a life or death headspace. This is weird.
totally. Man, and you feel as though that may not have been entirely accurate, right?
Oh yeah, 100% later. Well, luckily, or maybe it was, but I read about it later. I was like, the numbers aren't that bad. I can't believe they told me I had a 50% chance. But I guess that that's the also benefit of being in medicine is that, and maybe everybody does it. Maybe everyone's like, are you sure? And maybe you should do that. Maybe we should all do that. Double check.
I remember I have two girls, and I remember my wife. She's like, okay, so when do you want me to pull the goalie? How's this going to work? And I'm like, I want to have kids in Q1. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, seriously, like if our job is to give the most advantages that we possibly could to our children, the first quarter is a massive advantage in every year of their school. They're normally older and more developed in each class. And when it comes to sports, coaches tend to spend more time with the people that are easier or showing like acceleration, and they don't even think about which month they were born. But by the time you get into professional sports, not that anybody who's got my DNA is going to be an athlete, but you can see that most of the people that are in the later years or later months of the year actually don't make it. So there's these things, and she's like, you're pretty crazy. And I'm like, no. There's like a Nobel award-winning article on this. Check this out.
They actually did a similar study for people who were getting paroled. And they found that the people who were, seen later in the day had a worse chance of being paroled than the people who were first seen in the beginning of the thing. So like, that's not crazy to me at all. Everything comes down to timing.
Totally. So then we're thinking like, okay, let's do this in May. And I couldn't believe that we had it was just like it happened both times. And I was like, oh my goodness, I walked around my entire 20s with a loaded gun. Right. And like, so I'm wondering on your side where you're like, I'm not sure if this thing's going to fire. We got to figure this out.
Yeah, that was there. But I realized, so that was there. So the first thing is like, can this even happen? Can we get pregnant? That was there. And there was a bit of anxiety there, but I tried to just like not think about it. And I had been busy sort of optimizing my body as much as I could, because post-cancer, I was like, I am going to change everything. Like, I'm not going to smoke. I'm going to reduce my drinking. I'm going to be a healthy specimen because I know what it's like to be sick. And I don't ever want to go through that again. So I'd already taken a pretty dramatic change, I think, in the way I live my life. And I had some feeling that I was healthier in my 30s than I was in my 20s. So I felt good about the process. And then I tried to like not have any anxiety over it, because if it happens, wonderful. If it doesn't happen, I'm okay. I thought I'd be okay. I don't know if my wife would have been okay, but like I would have been fine. I've been like, all right, we'll make this work somehow.
Yeah. That's a very good outlook, and that's that same thing shining through before of like I can make it happen from here.
I can make it happen here, or I can be okay with what happens.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a huge thing for me too. Is this within my control?
Mm.
Now, going back to around that time, that's probably where you were like up to your eyeballs in clinical trials, like looking around at like what was available and what was happening. Is this where this kind of takes hold?
No, the clinical trial story happens in like this guy named, I don't know, his first name was Giovanni, and he's the guy who in the like 80s revolutionizes clinical trials for people with Hodgkin's lymphoma. And like I read about this guy while I'm getting my ABVD, and I'm just thinking like my life is saved for this man who took our mortality from the 70s to like the 90s. And like this is what this bench scientist in Italy does, and changes my life. And I'm appreciating it at the time. Then I become a physician, and I'm an immunologist. And then there's these patients who have this disease called chronic hives or chronic urticaria. And these patients are suffering. There's meds, and they're pretty good, but like they're costly. They're like $1,000 a month for 12 months. And so the vast majority of my patients can't afford them. And so now I've got like 50, 60 people who can't afford the med, and like they're suffering every day. There's just chronic hives on their body. There's itchy skin. There's lips are swelling. Their rates of depression are through the roof. Their anxiety is through the roof. The suicidality among this patient raises, quite high. And so I'm like, well, I got to do something. Like I got to do something, and I got to find a fix for this that's free. Like I got to find a free fix for this. And the only place where that even remotely possible is clinical trials, right? Like that's the only place you're going to find a medicine that could potentially work and help the patients who can't afford, and it's weird. Like the distribute, a lot of times it was working people. It was people who had jobs, but like they just didn't have insurance, and they were like in their 30s or their 40s, or their like it wasn't distributed in the way you might expect. And you feel even like you feel for all of them, the people who can't afford it for one reason or the other, and who are suffering, and they're still doing their best for their families. They're still doing the best for themselves they can, when they're just like popping 6 antihistamines a day and just praying for a miracle.
Wow. The inside of that isn't exactly as I think anybody would expect. And I can see how this would tie also with you having gone through that experience to be like, now these people are suddenly in this spot where, when you're not feeling good, how do you work more to try to afford this stuff? A lot of the times it probably limit their capacity.
100% limits their capacity, increases their absences, and like touches me deeply because, like, yeah, my doc, I'm a doctor and they're my patients, but like I feel for them now in a deeper way than I did before, and that has some great things about it, and that's some terrible things about it. But like that's who I am now. Like if you come in and you're my patient, then like I'm gonna break myself for you because somebody showed up for me when I needed it.
Mm-hmm. And that's very interesting. It's a neat perspective on paying it forward. Now, if all of these advancements are only available through clinical trial, why is the system so difficult?
The system's super difficult because it's built around physicians and the pharmaceutical companies. It's not built around patients. So in terms of physicians, like if you don't know the right physician, you're not getting into the trial. You're not going to even hear about the trial. right? So it's not like we all have like a weekly meeting where all the physicians talk about what trials are available. Like we don't know the breadth of what's going on. We have no idea about. So the amount of information that's disseminated among us is small, but certainly the amount of information that's disseminated to regular patients is like minuscule. It's negative. So our outreach is terrible because we're focused about a particular physician's practice, and that's where most people get their patients. That in fact, that's how all pharmaceutical trials run. Basically, a physician has a clinic, and he decides to be, or she decides to be part of a trial, and be part of the trial world, and then they get all this stuff set up, and they hire a clinical coordinator, and then they say, "Yep, I'm ready to have people enroll in these different trials." The pharmaceutical companies come and study their sites and say, "Okay, you have lots of patients with this condition. We could try to find something here. You have lots of patients with that condition. We could find somebody there." But like, does that really work for the patients? Like, no, not at all.
Yeah. And also, I imagine that it would, if you're going to do a clinical trial and you're dealing with one doctor with a practice in a specific location, the sample size would be massively affected by that.
Yes, massively affected. So your sample size is based on this physician's practice, not on the amount of people suffering from the disease.
Wow. And if there was something that I guess the average person would probably be able to, is your vision almost like a Facebook marketplace for trials?
My vision is probably, actually a little bit bigger. I'll tell you, I'll lay it all on the table because I feel comfortable enough doing it. I see a world where patients are in charge of their own data, where their data is recompensated, like compensated through cryptocurrency. And they get to share what they want to share. They get to participate in what they want to participate in, and they have the opportunity to do so. I see a world where we cut out doctors and middlemen. And like, I see a world where patients have the ability to choose what trial they want to be part of, if they want to be in a trial. And even if they don't, even by participating, that they're, part of a community where they're helping each other, they're talking to each other, they're still paid in a cryptocurrency, they are still rewarded with NFTs. Like, I see all of that happening in 10 to 20 years.
Okay, let's dig into that. Let me unpack that a little bit further here. So let's talk about the data to begin with. Who owns patients' data now?
The pharmaceutical companies.
Okay, so if I were to agree to become part of a clinical trial, then I would be signing disclosures and essentially my right to my data over to them.
Basically, so not your personal data, like who you are and all that stuff, your name, all of that, they're not interested, but they're interested in your demographic, and they're interested in what happens to you in the trial.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not compensated significantly for being part of the trial. You have some level of compensation, sure, but it can't be too much, otherwise that's classified as inducement. So it can't be too much. But it is possible to reward people for being part of a community and being part of an app. And that's separate from enrolling in the trial. And I think that that's the step that needs to happen next.
Oh yeah, like for business, I end up being a client to a certain number of companies that have such a vibrant community that the community becomes more important than the service.
Yes, agreed.
And that's something that I could see here, where there's a bunch of people that are participating in a clinical trial and they may be experiencing similar things going through that, or obviously they already have some things in common related to their illness.
Yes, absolutely. Or they're not comfortable with being part of a clinical trial, but they still want to connect and talk to each other and support each other. That should be enough. They shouldn't have to, be part of a clinical trial. They shouldn't be forced to, I guess is what I'm saying. I want to build communities where it's an option.
Oh, because I imagine that it's also based on familiarity. It could be a situation where as things start off, that's not really part of it. But then when you see a few people you're connected to go through a similar experience, then that may change your perspective.
Agreed, 100%. Absolutely.
Even if it doesn't, the support would still be a benefit.
Yes, and the support should still be there independent of what you choose.
Hmm. And then when we're talking about like participating with your data, this would almost be like content creators now. So if you're creating a lot of content that's considered to be valuable in places like TikTok or YouTube, they have agreements with you where they will pay you a percentage of what they make essentially through advertising. And in this same situation, in this situation, when you choose to share your data, what do you see as needing to change there? Because you're saying that they're being compensated, but not enough. Would you want to see it calculated differently?
I think I'd want to see a different model. I'd like to see a micropayments model where every step along the way you're compensated. And if you're part of the community for enough time and you've made enough posts and you've contributed, you're rewarded with an NFT. And these are different way, and those NFTs, are going to be part of your digital identity. They're going to be, and they're going to show that you as a person have cared and have done your best to help others. And I think that is tremendously positive. And I'm interested in changing the model. I think just the model of clinical trials is old and outdated, and it's not about people. And I think if we change that, if we actually make it entirely about the patients, we're going to have faster clinical trials. So clinical trials that aren't delayed, that actually get done on budget and on time. And we're going to make the world a better place.
Are there any like clinical trials that would probably be considered well known to you, but probably not to me? Like what does a successful like or what was a successful clinical trial that changed elements of medicine?
Hmm. That's good. Well, I would say the most obvious one was the COVID vaccine. So they throw a ton of money at the situation with this, Operation Warp Speed, and they bang it out. Lots of different companies all around the world bang out these trials, make them happen, find these drugs, which kind of goes to show you that when there's the right incentive, lots of things can change. When we decide to cure something, we can cure something. But shouldn't we decide to cure, I don't know, breast cancer? Shouldn't we cure ovarian cancer? Shouldn't we have the same amount of rigor to Parkinson's? Like, we can't we?
Yeah, I understand where you're saying like there doesn't seem to be enough alignment. Whereas when there was one enemy, everybody was wrapped together and putting resources together.
Yeah, I would say it's focus. I say we lack focus as a species until there's an existential threat. And then all of a sudden, we're all hitting it on all cylinders, which means that we could just have better processes and better focus and cure the worst diseases that are, crippling us and destroying families and costing us lots of money. Like these cures are good economics if that's all we care about.
So when it comes down to cures, I think that that's also something that's interesting because you're an immunologist, right? And our immune system is what a lot of people were talking about during COVID, saying like I'm a young, healthy adult, and my immune system could deal with this, right? And I kind of saw that work for myself as well. Like I did do the vaccines, but also I had kids that were too small to do the vaccine, and they just like walked through COVID, like no problem. What was your
Okay, so
perspective on that?
sure. So I would say my perspective is that you never know. Okay, so like you're really yes, there's percentages. Percentages are healthy people seem to do well, younger people seem to do well. Those percentages are wonderful. We're very glad. And, we're very happy for that. However, on an individual basis, I've seen healthy 30-year-olds get COVID and their lives are crippled with long COVID. Like these are healthy 30-year-olds. They used to be running marathons and now they're having problems taking a deep breath. So because I saw it all, I realized that like it's scary, right? And it can, you don't know what life is going to give you, right? Like the probability of being crippled in a car accident is rare, but should you be that one person, it will be life changing. And so while there are great arguments about our immune systems, we're learning a lot more. At the same time, tragedy can happen to anybody, and the best thing to do is avoid being sick.
Yeah, like wear your seatbelt.
Yeah.
Like the how do you curve off the worst negative outcome, or at least
Agreed.
protect yourself from that.
Agreed. Do every due diligence, like you said. What's under my control? Whatever is under your control at a level that you feel comfortable with, you gotta do that. Because then if something does happen and you had made a miscalculation, right? Like if you weren't wearing your seatbelt and then you were in the accident, you're going to be angry at yourself, right? Like that's going to add an extra level of difficulty, where you realize you didn't take an action that could have, helped you.
And what was the thing that drew you into that as a specialty?
I think it was the understanding that all the newest drugs are going to be immune system based. They're all going to be biological drugs. They're all going to be immune system drugs. I felt very strongly that the cure for most diseases, cancers, aging, I felt all of that was going to be in immunology, and being an immunologist would allow me to understand them.
And as you can you unpack that a bit? When you're saying that all the new drugs are immune system drugs, what do you mean?
I mean, we're creating new immunotherapies for cancer. We're creating new ways for the immune system to fight cancers, and it's not like cancer specific. Like it's like a wide variety of things. It's like, it could be your lung, it could be stage 4 lung cancer, it could be renal cell cancer, it could be this, it could be that, but we are figuring out common pathways. So medicine is structured around organ systems. And that's the old way medicine was. You're a heart doctor, you're a lung doctor, you're this, you're that. But what we really should learn about is being process orientated. Like that's what immunology is saying that there's immune processes, cells, and when they're in dysregulation, they cause different patterns of disease. And so like that is a step deeper. And that is what really intrigued me, was the idea that if you learn the processes and the cells involved in it, it all makes sense.
Interesting. So I picking this up wrong, where before it was almost like doctors were focused on the victims. Like the victim of a heart attack is the heart, and the victim of asthma is the lungs. Whereas now you're saying that, instead we should focus on that solution. Instead of focusing on the gap, we should focus on the gain. And if you were able to help the immune system do what it's already trying to do, that would be a more effective approach.
I would say that medicine was structured in a way that made sense at the time. So we thought about the heart as disparate organs, and we knew that they worked in concert, but we got good at one thing. Right. So like, I'm going to get really good at listening to this heart. I'm going to listen to this heart. I'm going to know 16 different things that happens if this sound goes this way. And they got really great at it. And then other people study the kidneys. I know 17 different things that can happen when the kidney function goes down. And I know how to figure this out. Brilliant. Amazing. But what we are learning about is that there are processes. And if we understand the processes, we can better create solutions, right? Because like, I think we were disease orientated. We wanted to fix the disease. Now we're realizing we need to be process orientated. We need to figure out the pathological processes and fix them at that level.
I see. So almost see where it's going instead of watch where it is.
Yes. Brilliant.
That helps me understand. And really, when it comes down to what we're seeing next in immunology, what do you think is working really well and that is going to open doors in the future?
Yeah, I think cancer immunotherapy. I think that's the biggest thing. I think we're going to figure out lots of broad-based therapies. I think eventually we're going to learn about individual therapies where like you're going to get your tumor, you're going to get it typed. So they're going to take a piece of your tumor. They're going to say, oh, look at this process is off. This process is off. This thing is off. Okay, you need this therapy. Junk, boom, you're done.
Wow. That's something that's interesting to me because I'm part of the team at ArisMD, and they do augmented reality and virtual reality to help see more holistically in scans. When you're talking about immunotherapy, is that something that is also very much tied to catching things in early stages?
It should be. Catching things in early stages makes a world of difference. So that's really interesting. You're talking about the liquid biopsy stuff that's coming out where we are taking very small samples. We're taking blood samples, we're running them through, we're finding the proteins, and we're hoping to find early stage cancers. Okay, so you find an early stage cancer, you're going to cure it. You're going to find a late stage cancer, that's tough. That's rough. There's no doubt about that. So what you guys are trying to do is amazing, right? The earlier we find these things, the better off people will be, the more we're going to be able to save lives. Absolutely. That's a cost-effective and reasonable approach. I also take the approach that we should also be able to cure late-stage cancers. We should, right? Like, yes, we should, on a population level, move towards early stage. I love it. Amazing. Fantastic. But if you can cure a late-stage cancer, you can cure anything.
Yeah, well, that's how you know you've definitely got it beat, right?
Yeah.
And when I remember meeting some people in an airport. I was heading to Montreal to watch Formula One, and I met some people from Ecuador, and I was asking how it went through COVID for them, and they're like, "Well, it was really easy there because the healthcare is awful." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Well, I know it sounds harsh, but we didn't really have any at-risk people because they die." And I was just like,
Yeah.
"What?" Like, and they're like, "Yeah, you like the people that were the most at risk during COVID, like they're just not here." And I was like, I had never even looked at it that way.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's optimal.
No, but I didn't realize how far we've gone to basically make more things happen and at least get people to live long enough that we can understand what's going on. Right?
Okay, I can
I knew somebody that lost their father to pancreatic cancer, and it was just go. Right? So you're
yeah.
saying that if we could
Yeah,
catch
I
really
guess what you're
fast.
saying is, people live a long time in our societies, and that is a strength because, we want to we want people to live, right? That's important. Um Yeah, I think that what we're going to learn and what we're going to do better is we're not going to just keep people alive, but we're going to keep people healthy. And I think the next generation of Zoomers who are, they're walking, they're lifting weights, they are fasting, they're open to all of these things, they're going to change what it means to be elderly. Like, I remember my grandmother at 92, she had difficulty walking and life was challenging. But I know that my mom at 92 is going to be different, right? If she listens to me, which, would be great. But, right, like, which would involve, like, yeah, you have to progressively weight lift, right? Like, you got to do resistance training, you got to walk. Like, you probably shouldn't drink as much, right? Or at all, I guess, right? So, making these, every generation, we get better at this. And what we're going to see is aging treated as a disease. And once we realize and accept that, then we can change. We can change the way being older looks. And that's exciting.
Okay, so that's pretty wild to me. So looking at aging as though it's a disease. To break it down, my understanding of aging is cells failing to replicate themselves perfectly, right? There's like a degradation over time.
Okay, so that you're talking about like the oxidative stress mechanism. So you're saying like as cells accumulate stress, the genes have mutations and the machinery breaks down. Okay,
Right.
but one thing that most people think is that this is inevitable.
Okay.
Like, this is a consequence of aging. This just happens to you.
And that's
But
not the
like,
case?
that's not the case. No, that is not the case. The case is, it's habits. right? Like it's our habits, right? Like if your habit, I saw 100-year-old who was running marathons. Like, okay, that person isn't genetically gifted to run marathons. That person has made significant changes in their life. The person was on a vegan diet. They were doing weightlifting, and I was on a vegan diet since the age of 65. So, we can change everything. We can change everything about ourselves. We can change our future by habits. And what habits do we want to get rid of? What habits do we want to adopt? And when do we adopt these habits? At any stage, they're beneficial. If you're 70 and you want to pick up weightlifting, good for you. Absolutely. Go ahead, go try it. You will see benefit. If you're 50 and you decide to go and start fasting on a 16 to 8 situation, good for you. You're going to have significant benefits as a result of that. And those benefits are going to translate to a completely different elderly life, golden years, than we have ever seen.
Okay, so I see that a bit. I see like the guy who does marathons is going to probably not have the same breakdown of his respiratory system and many other things related to him running marathons. But like the way that he looks probably still looks like an old guy.
Okay, so some people for sure will, but you could be like 100 and look like you're 80. You could be 110 and look like you're 90. And cosmetically, they will be ahead. Like cosmetics, like there's so much money behind that. So in a way to, will there be ways to continually look young? Absolutely. Look at Hollywood, right? Like Sylvester Stallone is in his 70s.
He's got a new movie right now.
Yeah, he's got a new movie right now. Guy looks amazing. Okay, so it's really about, can we get those therapies trickle down to us at a reasonable cost? And like what are they? Like what are the secret sauce that they've been using in Hollywood forever?
But there is secret sauce, and that's something that I find kind of ridiculous. Like Joe Rogan has to be like the canary in the coal mine for this. He's on testosterone replacement therapy and human growth hormone and things like that, and he's definitely exhibiting what you're saying, where he does not look his age.
Yeah, and he gets a bunch of NAD through his IV all the time. Yeah, like he's experimenting. I mean, there'll be some parts of that will work out well for him. There'll be some parts of that might not work out well for them. But like he has the ability to do so because he's got tons of money and he has access to the brightest minds in the fields, right?
Well, now this is me super interested in seeing this change, right? Like if we see this change where age is starting to be looked at as though it is treatable, and Clinical Trial Hero has a community of people that are essentially trying to limit their aging. And then we may see some of these trials that we see celebrities on becoming available to other people so that we can determine the benefits, how much works for us and against us.
Fair enough. But these celebrities aren't doing clinical trials. They are experimenting. Okay, so there's a little difference. Clinical trials got to go through some ethics. They got to go through some regulation. There's got to be some agreed upon science, all this stuff. You're Joe Rogan. You don't have to do that, right? You can just your bodybuilding friends tell you 7 different compounds to try. You pick the top 3. You see what happens. Like there are side effects, right? Like there are side effects to people being on, I saw a weightlifter who had taken a ton of steroids and his heart had hypertrophy, which basically means he grew extra muscle in his heart, which means that it was harder for him to pump. So like he looks great, but his heart is heavy and bigger. Like, so, right? Like we don't always know, the things that people try, whether it works out or it doesn't work out.
So that I see what you mean now. And there is no way to really measure because nobody's studying them that closely.
No, because this is not a clinical trial. Because this is a person who thinks that they want to take their health in their own hands and make their own choices. And some choices they make will be spectacular, and some of them will be spectacular failures.
That's interesting. So what do you like when you take a look, because obviously you're a big member of the clinical trial community, what type of things don't the average person know about that you find interesting?
I would say I'm more disease specific. So like right now I'm looking into people who've got chronic hives. right? Like I've got 70 patients in my clinic who can't afford therapy, and I need to get them in a trial. So like those are my first things. I think what you're saying is like, what does the average person not know about in the future that might be super interesting? And I would say that the most interesting things that we're learning about, or that I'm learning about, is like diet. Like I'm really learning a lot more about like fasting. I'm learning about how that affects people and how that affects illnesses. Like how does that change people? Also, strangely, I got to tell you, meditation. I think meditation is a far underrated therapy, and I think it truly can be a therapy for a variety of illnesses and diseases. And that's why one part of Clinical Trial Hero are guided meditations for people with chronic illnesses. Because I found when I was sick, that was a huge deal. Was mentally, I was stressed and I was messed up, and I had to fix my head. And so every time before I go to chemo, I fix my head, I meditate. And that's because we've done trials in breast cancer, and it's shown that people's mental makeup before chemotherapy impacts the result of the chemotherapy. So if I'm welcoming this drug into my body and saying it's going to cure me and fix me, I might have a better response than people who don't. And
Whoa. So you're talking about like almost like playing the placebo.
Yeah, I'm talking about playing the placebo for sure. I'm talking about, and maybe it's not a placebo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like okay, so that's something that that's amazing because there's people that experience a placebo effect when there's nothing there, right?
Correct.
And it's simply because of the power that you're talking about. They're focusing their mind.
Yes.
And so if they use that same ability, but actually tied it to the medicine that is shown to work, I could see that being a massive impact.
That's what we have to learn, investigate, and go out. But like, that's how I live my life. Right? Like if I'm going to get chemotherapy, I'm going in there with the best possible attitude, like being like, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for this chemotherapy. Let's get in my body. Let's do this. Right? And I don't know whether that makes a significant difference or it doesn't, but if I'm guessing, I'm going to guess it probably helps. Like if it can't hurt. It can't hurt to be in a positive frame of mind while you get chemotherapy drugs coursing through your system.
Yeah, I can understand that. Now, let's go into the diet side. When we talk about like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, a lot of the time diet is what's contributing to a lot of these factors right now. And so taking a look at like what that would change, what are you seeing the correlations to in diet? And did you go through, like you said, coming out of cancer, that you were like, I'm changing everything? What did you learn through doing that?
So first, I struggled with my diet. I didn't get my diet together till like this year. This was the first time, and like this was years later. I love food. I loved eating. I loved drinking. I loved food. It was amazing. Like I I don't like, that was my thing. I love to go out to a restaurant. I love to eat like, like a pig and have a great time with my friends and family. That's what I loved. And I think what changed was that like I actually watched my brother. My brother's a cardiologist, and he went down to one meal a day. And he did it sort of accidentally because he was so busy. But I saw him live on a one meal a day situation. And eventually, he's my older brother, people started saying that I was the older brother. And he's 3 years older than me. And I was like, this is bullshit. Like, I can't believe, like, how did this happen to me? Like, and so then I realized, like, man, he's eating one meal a day. He's working out. Like, and then I watched and David Sinclair, who's a Harvard trained scientist, and he was talking about, if you're calorically restricting yourself, you're activating the right genes that help destroy things like cancer, and it is an anti-aging situation. So I mean, most of my situations came from my personal life. And then I said, okay, I can do 16-8. Like I can't do one meal a day. I get hungry. I get cranky. I'm having troubles with that. I can do 16-8, but like I can try keto. I can try and see how that feels. I can see how it works for me and how good I am at sticking at it. Turns out like I'm okay at sticking at it. I'm not perfect, but at least I realized that like if I reduce my daily intake of sugar, I've done good, right? Like I might not always be able to say no to a glass of wine, but I can definitely say no to, eating ketchup all the time. Like, ketchup was something I loved, but then I realized that, like, I don't think this is the healthiest thing I should be putting on everything.
I think that there's a lot of people that don't know that. Like, there's a doctor on TikTok, and he shows people what it's like. So he'll hold out like 5 M&Ms, and then he'll say, like, could you imagine eating 25 heads of broccoli? That's what these 5 M&Ms are. The
Wow.
reason that nobody gets fat eating broccoli is because to consume this calorie would be near impossible.
Yes.
Right. And a lot of people don't know the measurements, or like in a bottle of pop, it was like 24 cubes of sugar. And for me, getting that kind of like affiliation with like, oh, I see, if I frame it in a way that I can see the negativity, that really helps me. Like, how they put the teeth on the cigarette packages?
Yes. And that was the worst package. Everything else, they were like, lung cancer, yeah, whatever, that's fine. Oh, no, my teeth are going to look like, all right, I'm done.
I don't even know what my lungs look like, so this doesn't look too bad.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, teeth was the worst one. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to be the future, where some of these foods that are considered to be on the negative side will have to show how negative they are.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. That'd be really good. I mean, we're trying to inform people. We should be informing people. We shouldn't, our grocery aisles are like, they're weird, right? Like, you look, it's like rainbows everywhere and like new and improved here and there. And like, it will be, our diet will be a huge part of our aging, of our life. And if we can change what we eat happily, that's a big deal.
I wonder about that. Like, when you think about all your other experiences, where are you more inundated with marketing than at the grocery store? Walking down the aisles, seeing Captain Crunch, right? Like, they have characters, they are drawing to you. All of this is evidence of a struggle, which is their competition with each other, right?
Absolutely. The only place that's worse is the internet, right? Like, every time you open up a search engine, every time I open up a tab, there's like a list of 50 articles, right? Like, you might want to read this, you might want to read this, you might want to read this. And then I realized that a lot of my surfing was aimless, was habitual, right? Like, being on Twitter is habitual. Like, am I learning anything from this? Is this changing my outlook? Is this helping me? I don't know. So the advertising people of every industry are excellent. They're excellent at their job, which is getting your attention.
Attention is the highest value currency on the planet.
Agreed.
And when you take a look at how we approach these things, I think that there's a lot of people that don't realize that they're the co-pilot to the algorithm. That you're the one flying along, but the algorithm is driving in a way that you probably wouldn't agree with.
The algorithm is actively showing you what it thinks you want to see. And the more information you give it, the better it will become at this. However, as a result, your worldview will become askew. I found that, like, I used to read the news. And now I really try not to. I really try not to read the news, because it is really just about what point of view does this device think I have? And I'm going to show you a million different articles about the point of view I think you have. And it's no longer, I think, about an objective truth.
Man, I wanted to try to solve that problem once upon a time. I owned a website called Trend Gorilla that worked off the back of Google Trends. And in a single page would show people why something was trending and what it was, like an aggregate view. And the thing that I was irritated with was the same thing that you're talking about now, which is that there was manipulation inside of all of these articles. So I was talking to a couple of people. One was a psychometrician. Do you know what psychometricians do?
No, tell me.
They write multiple choice exams.
Oh, wow.
And so I was asking her about how could we basically like psychologically register words. So imagine that all the negative words would appear red and all the positive words would appear green. And then as someone who is a marketer, I understand that manipulation dissolves when you can see it. So as soon as you recognize somebody's trying to manipulate you, the effect is no longer, right?
Wow.
And that's why a lot of people that do manipulate others try to get them into a situation where others aren't around, right? They try to isolate them so that they can take effect, but other people can see what they're doing. So in this same thing, what would happen is if you were going to read an article, but before you started to read, you could see that it was color coded to be negative. Would you be
That
able
would
to
change everything. Yes, that would change everything.
Yeah,
and then you can compare them. Imagine if you went on CNN and then you went on Fox and then you compared them. Like, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, and eventually it kind of looked like an optometrist's office to me, where you would try on the different lenses and say, okay, does this sway to the left or the right? I want to know before I read it. Does this does this sway positive or negative? And now there's some companies that are actually doing this. Ground News is an app, and it actually shows you left, right, or center, and it also shows you something amazing, which is when only one side is writing about a subject and the other side is quiet. Yeah, so I definitely see what you mean when it comes down to those things. Like it's almost like it's many faces of something that actually is trying to take from you, whether it's your attention. Sometimes they add stress because they know that it turns people towards like consumer behavior. But this is not a friendly monster.
No, it is not.
So, and when you take a look into the next couple of years and take a look at clinical trials, do you see how maybe like you were talking about things like crypto and NFTs? Where's the metaverse going to play with this? What happens when we're able to get people together in a way that they see as being physical from everywhere?
Interesting. Okay, so we're getting closer to the ability to decentralize trials. That's part of the platform we are building, where you're going to be able to run a trial and people are going to be treated in their homes. So like, the medicine will come to your home. You will do a video call with your doctor to see how it's going. You will get your blood taken by a nurse who will come visit you in your home and take it away. So now we're moving to the ability of treating people in their own homes. Like, that would be spectacular, or that would be significant. Then the addition to that, I guess, would be the community. Would be like, you're part of this clinical trial group. Do you want to chat with others? Right? Or do you want to chat with others who have your condition? And now you're just putting on your goggles and, you're going out there and chatting with them. The first step is going to be bringing these people together in so for our app, one of the things that we're going to add are chat rooms where people who are interested in the trial have the ability to talk to one another. And so that'll change everything. But I think that the next step after that will be, how can we bring people together and respect their privacy?
Yeah, that's going to be a tricky one. I did have somebody on the podcast a little while back, Josh Bankston, and he's on the committee of ethics for virtual reality and for AR and VR, and understanding where those borders are, because there's some things that we can't really see yet, which is like when you have cameras on you that are going to be there to show your position, they'll also show things like micro expression, how you react to things. And this is something that algorithms will get very trained to very quickly, and it could basically allow them to victimize people that are maybe going through stress. Right? Like, find people at weaker points of time. You know how you were saying less people get paroled in the afternoon?
Yeah.
Well, imagine if you could sell something to someone, more readily when they were hungry.
Yeah. And you could pick it all up in a micro expression and take it from there. Yeah, that's deeply troubling, but probably going to happen.
Yeah. But I imagine that there's also going to be something equally awesome. Right now we're using all these devices to like measure what we're doing, like activity. And I'm wondering what happens when you turn them around and you start to stimulate things inside your body by telling them what to do.
Yeah, that's probably inherently positive. If we look at things like motivation, is there a way that we can start motivating people towards better habits easily? Like, is it going to be as easy as downloading an app and you being like, I want to lose weight? And they're like, great, no problem. We're going to help you lose weight. We are there with you the entire way. We are your virtual assistant and we will help you. We will check in. And with our help and our support, you are 70% more likely to be able to reach your goal. So
Yeah. And as
that's a
augmented
positive for
reality
that.
progresses, it could be a situation where you put on your diet glasses and no longer see the donuts.
Yeah. It could be, yes, you're right. It could be a lot of different things, or it could be, and how it turns out is exciting and hopefully positive.
I think so too. Well, it sounds like you're doing many positive things in the world. I really appreciate that you're so passionate about helping people. I don't think as many people recognize this, but like my wife is an emergency nurse and I know quite a few doctors. And I think that a lot of people think that when you guys care for patients, it's just like it's like a saying. But the truth is, I don't think you can be with other humans that are in distress without caring for them for real.
I would hope not. I mean, eventually lots of people get burnt out and it happens in their career where caring hurts. And like that is, I think, something that anybody who's ever been a caregiver knows, that sometimes actually caring about people hurts. And you have to learn how to deal with that. But you're right. It's not something that we take for granted. And it's nice to be able to be seen as a human being who's just trying their best, right, to help another person.
I think that's a great outlook. And it sounds like you also use things like meditation to find yourself in that space too.
I definitely say that it's mentally helped me a lot, and I would say that that mental change has led to just being better at being a physician, being a dad, and being a patient. Like I'm better now because I'm I'm able to be within myself and I'm able to say, these are the habits I have that I want to let go of, and these are the habits I want to adopt. And having a little bit of that insight can go a long way.
Wow. That's a great way to cap this off. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today. This is Leadership Line of Sight, and we have been here with Dr. Nikhil Joshi, to say that correctly. And I really appreciate that you've joined us today. Thank you again for sharing your story and the things that you're working on.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I had a great chat. This was an amazing hour, and thank you to anybody who's listening. I really appreciate your time.
And also welcome to our community. I'm looking forward to keeping up with you in what you do in the future, and then having you back. Anytime you have anything that you're like, man, I really want to talk about this. I had a great time talking with you as well. Let's do it again.
That sounds awesome.
All right. Well, you have a great day. Thanks again for joining us on Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor Hack. I am the marketing strategist at Gravidia, and I am looking to tap into the leadership inside everyone by continuing to introduce them to leaders like Dr. Nikhil Joshi here. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.